I do think as you go through this, for most people, it is quite confronting. I think it will encourage you to ask some provoking questions. It is a really good read. Actually, it's a really inspiring read. But at the same time, sometimes those people who have changed the world can make you also feel like, I'm so far away from that.
Yes.
So his definition of moral ambition, this is what I'm like, prepare yourself. It's the longing to make a difference and to leave a legacy. You don't do good things because you're a good person. You become a good person by doing good things.
Okay, we've got heavy.
Yeah.
But I would say that the majority of people, they're probably not necessarily consciously thinking about some of these world's biggest problems every day.
Yeah.
And probably not going to work every day going, I'm so ambitious, the bullshit job thing. I have a little bit of friction with that term, but I think I understand what he's trying to do, which is saying... Hi, it's Helen from the Squiggly Careers podcast. And before you listen to today's episode, I wanted to let you know about some news that Sarah and I are very excited about. And that is that our new book, Learn Like a Lobster, is now ready to pre-order. We think that learning is so important to people succeeding in their squiggly career, but we recognise that it is not easy to do. And so we wanted to inspire people to look differently at learning, and we think that lobsters are the role model that we have been missing. We really, really appreciate it when people pre-order our book. It means that our book gets momentum and also you get it first. But we know it's a while before that book arrives, and so anyone who pre-orders, we have got a special surprise. The surprise is the Learn Like a Lobster library, and you will become a member of the library when you pre-order the book. In the library, you will find 3 live learning sessions with Sarah and me, one in October, November and December. There's lots of tools for you to try out, and there's a community to connect with. So please, please, please pre-order Learn Like a Lobster now. Support Squiggly Careers and support your own career too. If you send your pre-order to hello@learnlikealobster.com, we'll be in touch with everything you need to know to join the library. So pre-order the book, send it to hello@learnlikealobster.com, and we will be in touch with everything else. On to today's episode. Hi, I'm Helen.
And I'm Sarah.
And this is the Squiggly Careers podcast, where every week we get curious and use our conversation to turn that curiosity into action to support you in your squiggly career. And we're borrowing brilliance from lots of different things. It could be people. So we've done one with Richard Feynman, a physicist. It could be books. It could be objects. And we're taking it in turns to sort of lead the conversation. So Sarah is leading us through her curiosity today. What are we going to be talking about, Sarah?
So today we are talking about moral ambition. Right. Deep breath, everybody, I would say.
Is it hard hitting?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. Okay.
By Bregman. And so, yes, it is. That is my starting point for this is it is quite confronting. I do think as you go through this, for most people, it is quite confronting. Maybe some people, though, will just be like, feel really smug. So if you are doing something incredible and saving the world in every which way, you'll feel really good about yourself. For the rest of us, I think it will encourage you to ask some provoking questions. And what I have tried to do today is take the concept and go, right, what could everybody do? And it is, it is a really good read. Actually, it's a really inspiring read. But at the same time, I don't know, sort of sometimes those people who have changed the world can make you also feel like, oh, I'm so far away from that. But it is reading the book is very time well spent. It is a really good book.
What made you buy it, pick it up?
I was like, I wonder what moral ambition is. I recognise Rutger Bregman's name from Humankind. Which I think I did read some of, but I didn't ever connect with it. I've not really read it. Like I couldn't tell you all the key themes, and so I was like, I'm interested in kind of what that is. And if you're wondering what is it, so his definition of moral ambition. So this is where I'm like, prepare yourself. The will to make the world a wildly better place. It's the longing to make a difference and to leave a legacy. And so it is really ambitious in terms of like what you're asking of yourself, definitely. And he does have this really good quote, which I think this is more maybe reassuring. You don't do good things because you're a good person. You become a good person by doing good things. So we can all do that, right? It's not like some of us are listening to this now and go, oh, I'm a bad person.
Yeah.
It is very much about your action. And the book does start with this statement where he says, a full-time career consists of 80,000 hours, 10,000 work days, or 2,000 work weeks. How you spend that time is one of the most important moral decisions of your life.
Okay, we've got heavy.
Yeah. It's not going to get loads lighter. It might do as I try to kind of come up with some actions for us all. What is interesting is the real emphasis on doing. So you could read books like this and be like, oh, it's very thinky and reflective, and you need to think really deeply. All of those things would be true. But he does put a real emphasis on the people who are very good at being kind of morally ambitious. They do take action. It's like what counts is, are you prepared to do something? And he talks about this belief behaviour gap. So, like you believe something is the right thing to do, but do you behave in a way that reflects that? And he said loads of us have lots of belief behaviour gaps. Like, of course you do. Like you could say, so if I'm like, you are going to have to say some things here about yourself where you're like, oh, okay. So, like, for example, I still eat meat. And that's a good example of the belief behaviour gap of going, well, actually, if you wanted to do more that was good for the world, you would stop eating meat. So you can feel smug about that. You don't eat meat. So there you go.
Can I just ask, when we're talking about moral ambition, because I think it will frame how I think about what you're going to share, are we talking about like those, like making the world a better place because we're not eating meat, or we're not, we're aware of our, I don't know, carbon footprint or the resource we're consuming? Are we talking about that? Or does it, if that doesn't connect with people, does it also relate to like an average day at work and how you build relationships? What's the...
So I think he does direct people to like working on the world's biggest problems. So there is definitely like that zoomed out point of view. And he has got a website called moralambition.org where he actually describes some of those like collective challenges, sometimes by a set of countries, sometimes they're like a world problem, to give some examples of things that like we could all work
better
on. Yeah. So things like tax, making sure kind of tax is fair. So those are big problems, kind of global problems. He does, as you get into it, at least hint to kind of what individuals can do, and that it does kind of matter for everyone kind of within your own context. He is pretty scathing of, he has this like matrix of not so idealistic, not so ambitious. And he basically says people are in 4 categories. And so if you're not so idealistic and you're not so ambitious, he describes this as like you're doing a bullshit job, basically. Then you get into idealistic and not so ambitious. You're like a passionate part-time, or maybe you're like an online activist. If you're ambitious but not idealistic, you're a corporate lawyer, you're a consultant, you're in finance or tech. Both of us have worked in both of those industries. This is what I mean. You're like, okay. Which, is interesting. And then he said, if you're idealistic and ambitious, you should have moral ambition. And there is a good link to the key concepts in the book, a good Guardian article. So if you're like, I don't know if I want to read the book yet, or I just want to get like started, I would really encourage you to read the Guardian article, which is free and there's kind of no paywalls. And you do get a real feel for a kind of a bit of a starting point.
Yeah, my initial thoughts are, I'm very open and I'm very intrigued and I'm looking forward to learning. But I would say that the majority of people are kind of in probably what he is phrasing as a sort of bullshit job thing, like they're probably not necessarily consciously thinking about some of these world's biggest problems every day, and probably not going to work every day going, I'm so ambitious. They're sort of, they're going to work. So I feel a little bit like, oh, I don't know. Like the bullshit job thing. I feel I have a little bit of friction with that term, but I think I understand what he's trying to do, which is saying the world is spending a lot of time at work. And if we put that to work on something bigger, it would be better. So I'm going to hold that in my mind.
His big argument would be there is loads of talent being wasted rather than well spent. You know, like, are you doing work that matters, that makes a difference, that feels meaningful? I think your observation is a really good one. You know, like the majority, where within that matrix is like the majority of people who are probably like a bit idealistic and a bit ambitious, because I think that's where most people would be. Maybe, but maybe not you and I. Like, I think in some ways I would, by his categorization, you and I would have both at times gone in the ambitious, not idealistic one.
Yes.
You know, you can't, like, I worked for a big bank. You worked for a big global tech company, which is why, like, as you are reading, it does make you think, all right, crikey, but I don't feel he isn't trying to beat you up. I would actually say those some of the things that I have picked out. I like deliberately provocative because I'm like, it's interesting, right? It is an optimistic read, and he is encouraging, and he does give you loads of good examples of people who have made a difference. So I think you can get to this point and be like, well, that sounds really daunting. That's not doable. But in the book, he does say the majority of people who end up making actually a really significant difference start really small. They rarely start from scratch, and usually you're learning from other people. So it's not like you have to create a massive movement or save the world by yourself or completely re-engineer everything. It's often just like one small action kind of leads to another. I think the thing that he would always want people to be doing is just doing something, you know, like not being passive, being active rather than passive.
Okay, so talk to us about what we can do.
Here we go.
I'm ready.
You're ready. Hopefully, if nothing else, I think it's something to be curious about. You know, like you said, like feel really intrigued by. So what could you, and I wrote in capitals, do? I was like, right, crikey, what am I going to do? One of the phrases he does use, which may or may not reassure people, is like, you've got to demand more of yourself. And I was like, okay. I actually do think, though, since reading the book, I have demanded more of myself. So, I mean, it's sort of worked. So I'm going to give some examples. So number one, you can volunteer. We can all volunteer more or start volunteering in some way. And actually what's good about volunteering is it's good for you. Like, we know there's loads of research that we've talked about before around your own happiness, how healthy you are. It's really good for your kind of mental health, and obviously really good for other people too. It's kind of that point, like, givers gain more. You do come back to that, actually, this idea of like having a giving mindset.
Yeah.
And that volunteering can be anything. And I think it can also serve quite a few different purposes. It could be a way of you exploring something that, if you do want to do something different, volunteering is a great way to start understanding that world. So I do think some people might read this book and go, right, I want to do something dramatically different. If that's you, I think volunteering helps you to get there. Some people, like me, will read it and think, okay, I don't want to do something dramatically different, but I do take the point that I could probably demand more of myself. So what might that look like? And it means you get to spend time with different people. And a practical way of making progress on the question is like, how can I contribute the most? You know, like, where can I volunteer my time, my skills in a way that's going to be really useful? Because I think this is all about being useful rather than necessarily just like following your passions. You know, he's quite anti the following your passions statement.
So I guess just thinking about that in terms of volunteering times in ways that we could be useful, things like speakers for schools to inspire young people to think differently about how they enter the workforce, or helping other businesses in our ecosystem, as in other businesses that want to make careers better for everybody, just giving them some of their time to help them sort of start and scale their ideas and thinking. Or you and I kind of both work in sort of trustee roles, so giving our time to other organizations that are kind of working on something that we're passionate about and contribute to, but it's of no commercial benefit to us. It's our, we're trading time to help them do what they're trying to do, that sort of thing.
Yeah, totally. And I was like, right, okay, how would I make this really concrete? Because I was like, right, we're going from really quite a big zoomed out idea here to something quite zoomed in. So I gave myself a score. I was like, right, if action 1 is to volunteer, start, build, expand your volunteering, what would I give myself out of 10 at the moment in terms of my volunteering? About how much of a meaningful contribution do I make through my volunteering? So I gave myself a 5 out of 10. So I'm not starting from 0, which I think as you go through this, it is quite good to recognise what you already do before you beat yourself up too much. And to your point, I was like, well, I do volunteer my time for some mentoring every year through a programme. I do volunteer my time for 3 organisations who I believe are making careers and work better for everyone. Some of those are completely voluntary organisations as well. So I feel like you kind of double your impact, perhaps that way. For some of them are commercial, which I don't think feels quite the same. But then you can start to challenge yourself to go, right, if I'm demanding more of myself, what else could you and I do? What else could Amazing If do? Given our mission and our ambition is to make careers better for everyone. So I don't think it's a surprise. So I read this book for the first time in the summer. We are now actively exploring quite a few partnerships where we could support people with their careers that we don't support today. And I don't know if I would have had those conversations or been as proactive if I hadn't read the book. And I think that's sort of the point. So that's not dramatically different to what you and I do today, but I think it's pushed me and nudged me, to kind of go further.
I think, just giving where you started from about like the 80,000 hours and, those metrics, I think I would, rather than maybe a score, I do like your score, but I think I might even go one bit further with that and almost do like hours, what percentage of my time. I think I would go to hours a month or hours a year and think, well, how do I redesign my week? Or if I was in a corporate, could I speak to my manager? Because lots of companies that I've worked in have had sort of policies where they can support volunteering hours, and I'd maybe try and like lock that in and formalize it so it was becoming part of my work.
Yeah, and it's sort of like the thing, some companies do, we're always going to give 10% of our profits away. You could be like, well, I'm always going to give, because the thing that's not talked about loads in the book is like, it's also money. He does talk about privilege. So as in if you're privileged, it's often easier to make some of these choices. Certainly historically, he gives some examples of like people who've, not everyone, but some people who've done some amazing things. Like hundreds and hundreds of years ago, they were quite privileged. So they sort of could, they could make those, they had the means to make those arguments. But what there's not a lot of discussion of is like, okay, but most people can't give up loads of time or money to do lots of volunteering because, like everybody still has mortgages to pay and rent to pay and things. So I think your point is a really good practical one, because you could say, well, if I don't do any of this at the moment, what would 1 hour a week look like? Yeah. And I think connecting that with something that you care about, I think this could be to do with work, but I don't think it has to be. I was reading actually
about do something with kids, right?
Yeah, like I was thinking schools, kids, volunteering for like reading time. I was reading in my local magazine that the local food bank near where I live have more requests for food than ever before, but are 25% down year on year on donations. Even though they get loads, they're still not kind of getting enough to meet the demand. And so you might read, and that connected to me. I've worked on food waste before when I worked in a supermarket, and I was like, oh, okay. I don't think I'm quite new to this area. I was like, oh, I didn't realise that was there. I was like, I wonder if there's something I could do there. And that's completely separate to work.
My mum recently dressed up as a daffodil in order to collect money for charity.
Marie Curie?
In the supermarket. And I think she was there. I think you're not allowed to like shake, but I think she was very happy.
You're not allowed to shake.
You're not allowed to shake, are you? So I think she just smiled, dressed up as a daffodil.
Smiled with a little, please, yeah.
Please put it in the bucket.
So that's doing action 1. Do we feel a bit more concrete, a bit more doable than we did 10 minutes ago? Yes,
I think volunteering is a way that you can do good, and making that concrete by either giving yourself a score or setting some hours aside. I feel absolutely fine with that. I feel good about that.
So action number 2 is expanding your impact by one person or group. So I like this one because I feel like we can all do this. Now, he describes this as your moral circle. And there's sort of a diagram of like, I know, there's a diagram.
Like when you frame it, I'm like, that sounds great. And then the terms, I'm like, oh, that sounds heavy.
Yes.
Okay.
So your moral circle, imagine like concentric circles, and it starts in the middle and it's you. And then it goes out to like your loved ones, your friends, people you work with, neighbours, people in the community, the country, people, animals, you can kind of keep going. And so I was like, oh, okay, this one I can get to quite quickly, because you could just literally think about your role today. Who do you already have a positive impact on, and how? Like, what does that look like? And if you were just going to extend that by one person or one group of people, like, where would you go first? Like, who else would benefit from kind of what you've got to give? So I could think of one for you straight away, because this happened last week. So I was like, oh, okay. So this was Helen doing this. So you already do in Squiggly Careers in Action, in our weekly newsletter, you will sometimes do a Helen how-to for our community. And I'm like, great, people love those and it helps them with how to do something. And then last week, you were talking to our team about a GPT, creating a GPT, and you offered to do a Helen's how-to for our team. So actually you do something externally that actually you don't do for our team at the moment. And everyone's face just lit up. They were like, yes, please do me a Helen how-to. And so that would be a really good example of you extending your impact by, like, basically looking inwards rather than outwards, just with that example.
So question on that point, because I've kind of, the way you described it, I sort of saw moral circles, like concentric circles.
Yeah.
You have family, friends kind of going out. Is the aim to have more people in an existing circle? So can I help more friends? Can I help more family? Or is the aim to kind of go further out? So helping friends of friends, or, like outside of my company people?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think what he is trying to get you to is like a who else. So rather than help the people you currently help more deeply, which you could obviously also do, it's kind of like, who else are you not supporting that you could? And so then you go out and you're kind of hitting more people in more places. So it would be like us saying, whose career are we not making better? And how could we help those people? Because they're not the people that we help today. And so, for example, I could also think of one quite quickly, which I was like, that's always quite good if you can think of one. I mentor people through a program 1-to-1. But then this week, I'm going to an event that I've been to before, and I'm actually kind of hosting a table of 10 people so that I can help more people at once and also connect those people together. So I've expanded my impact from 1-to-1 to 1-to-10. So, that's not dramatic. That's not unrealistic. And again, this is where you see these things get to you. That idea came after I read the book. I think because you then start to think, I was so, trying not to beat myself up too much, but I was trying to challenge myself, to kind of go, well, what would that look like for me, expanding my moral circle, also in a way that feels realistic, with like my time and my effort and those kind of things. But back to positive impact, I think you do have to, this is not about just knowing more people. So it's not like I'll just extend my number of connections. It's in a way where you are giving. It's like, it is back to that, like people helping people. So, we would always talk about that's a great way to build your network. And I do wonder, he would never say this, and I suspect this is like his worst case scenario. But if you go through each of these, I do feel like I could make a pretty good business case for each of these being useful for your squiggly career. Like volunteering, new people to borrow brilliance from, stretch your strengths in different situations. Like extending your impact is a really good way to like use your strengths in a new way to discover new people. And you're like, it's very people helping people. That's really not the point of the
No, that's not why he wrote the book.
No. But I can get there.
Trying to save the world, we're trying to save careers. Yes, third action.
So third action, I actually didn't have a good answer to, but I liked the action. So one of the points he makes is there are hardly any what he calls like zeros. Like people who completely start from scratch and think, I'm going to create this thing. Like it's like 99.9% of people are not that.
People are already doing something good. Or no?
Because it is very hard to be the first one. So, the first person to speak out against slavery.
Okay, I've got it. Okay, so it's a different thing. Not because we're already doing something good. Someone has done the good thing we might try to do.
Yeah, and because it's actually quite hard. Because when he talks about like being a zero, you are typically going against something that is very accepted. And everyone does. And this is just how we do things. It'd be like somebody going now, well, we're all just going to stop using cars. That's just, we will stop flying. That just feels, like, it takes a lot of bravery, a lot of courage. You've got to be incredibly visionary, and typically put up with a lot of people disagreeing with you. But I mean, it's almost kind of good news, because actually if you read some of those examples, and some of them are in the book, they are inspiring, but they're really far away, right? Because you're like, well, that feels really tricky. So most of us, we're not a zero, and we don't have to worry about it. But what is helpful to have is spot a specific role model. So we act once others have led the way. Majority of us are really good followers, but you have to have someone or something to follow. And then actually people really innovate. People are often inspired by something or someone else, and then they come up with brilliant things. And so I think one of the things to do is to start the search, if you don't already have one, for what's the answer to that for you? Because actually when I thought about it, I can think about role models in the work that we do. So I can name people whose work I admire, or who people where I'm like, oh, I really like how they do what they do. But if I am connecting this back to being morally ambitious, like how they have maybe approached building their business, or kind of they're kind of more connected to something more kind of purposeful in that way, I was like, oh, that's a bit harder. So there's somebody I know, I was thinking, oh, I really like, so my friend Tom runs a company called Nice and Serious. And what I love about Nice and Serious, they do morally ambitious work, actually. They'd be good. They're a good example. So they're like a creative agency who do morally ambitious work. And they have a filter for who they decide to work with. They have some brilliant policies. They've got a really good period policy that they talk about. He writes a really good newsletter called Agency in Progress. And every time I read that, I'm like, oh, I feel like they're always stretching and challenging themselves, they do good work for good brands or good businesses, often charities or social enterprises, those kind of things. And I was like, oh, actually, that's a good example of the sort of business I want to build. So I was starting to get there, but it took me a little while. And that's obviously a little bit of an individual, but a bit of a business too, because then what you can start to ask yourself is, okay, well, how could I learn more from, I see Tom every so often, but probably only every couple of years, and I follow Nice and Serious, but I could dive into their world a bit more. Think about how they work. I could ask them more questions.
You could volunteer.
I could.
Close the loop.
I could go and do a Squiggly session for Nice and Serious, and in return just ask them loads of questions to be like, oh, okay, so how do you make some of these decisions? What about you? Can you it took me
I was just listening. I was listening and thinking, how you framed it. And I was thinking about Alex Hurst and Lizzie Penny, because how they've involved Hoxby. So I think now it is just Hoxby. When I first sort of became aware of them, it was Hoxby Collective, and their initial, you may not kind of have the words quite right, but my perception initially of their purpose was about sort of creating a new way for people to work. So bringing, people with lots of different skills together who wanted to work with lots of freedom in a sort of freelance way, bringing people together on projects. But actually over time, they've really taken what they have learned from managing this global community of people that want to work differently. And then they wrote this book called Work Style, and now they're sort of influencing policy to create better work for people. And I think that they are really good role models, because how they are evolving their business and how they are pivoting towards purpose, I find that quite inspiring, that the business you are today isn't the one you always need to be, and you can build on these principles over time to get closer to this kind of purpose-based outcome that you want. That was who I thought of when you were talking.
But that took me a moment. So again, you might have someone listening. You might be like, oh, I already know. I know the person, I know the company, I know the community.
I was thinking about Cook as well, who we've worked with for ages. That's another company.
That's a good example. Just shows though, doesn't it? You have to start talking about it and thinking. Cook are a very good example. Again, I love how transparent they are. I love how morally ambitious they are with who they recruit. They recruit a lot of ex-offenders, and they've really stayed committed to that. And
James Timpson. I mean, now you're going on. I could probably
easily. I think because initially, when I think role model, that sort of probably wasn't my filter, and so actually, it's just taken me a little while to. You're asking the question from a different angle, which I think it's a good thing. So I really hope everyone listening is okay and hasn't found it too overwhelming. It's funny. I recommended this book to Kath Bishop, who's been on the podcast before. Kath wrote a book called The Long Win, and she's brilliant. And I knew she was like, I've already bought it. You know, like I knew she was going to like it. And we both said afterwards, we were like, it really does make you pause for thought. And I think every so often you do need a book that challenges you, provokes you, prompts you to really ask yourself some difficult questions. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Not, you know, we don't want everything to be easy, right?
No, and I think not every book, I mean, a single book transforming you is probably a bit of a stretch, but a book that makes you think differently and question yourself. I think that is a good outcome. I always say to myself, like it's a good book if I've made notes in the margin. And I think if I would read I probably would.
I have got underlines. Yeah.
If you've got any feedback on this new format for us, because it is slightly different, let us know. And don't forget that we also have got our new Thursday episodes, which are Squiggly shortcuts. So very specific, very action orientated to help you in your Squiggly career. Our email is helenandsarah@squigglycareers.com. Let us know your thoughts on this episode. Let us know your feedback on the format and any other ideas or topics that you'd love us to cover.
Thank you so much for listening, everyone. We'll be back with you again next week. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.